You may have seen this story on NPR this week, but basically, there's a North Carolina church that a few months ago they fired their pastor because apparently he had become too provocative or something. And this is not some Southern Baptist evangelical MAGA loving clown show of a church. This is a relatively progressive church. So it didn't really make sense they were getting rid of their pastor for being, transgressive in a way. But the pastor's name is Ben Boswell. I want to play you a clip of the sermon that he delivered right after the election. And the reason I want to play a clip of this is because it seems like their decision to fire this guy came right after he delivered this sermon. So let me play this clip and then we'll talk.
One of the reasons we grieve today is because we've been told quite clearly that the election of Donald Trump will lead to the crucifixion of people we love. It will lead to the crucifixion of immigrant families, women in need of reproductive rights, transgender and non-binary people, sick people in need of health care, government workers clinging to a job, poor people in need of resources. And so we grieve today with our entire body for those who we love. But our faith also teaches us something else. It teaches us that every crucifixion needs a witness. We can witness to the truth of what is happening. We can speak truth to power. We can say, this is wrong. We can advocate for those who are being crucified by the empire. Every crucifixion needs a witness, because even if we can't save everybody or keep everyone off a cross, we can make sure the world knows what's happening to them, and no one can look away. We can make sure that the victims know that we love them, that God loves them, that they don't deserve this. And we can make sure there is someone alongside them so they won't be alone no matter what happens.
Honestly, that's a hell of a sermon. He sounds fantastic. I mean, I don't buy into, obviously, any of the religious things he was saying, but in terms of making a point using religious language, I think that was very good. But according to the NPR article, check this out. I love that this is the question you're asking because you're looking at the very bottom of the screen. Of course, I'm drinking the blue Gatorade. Anyway, when I looked what the NPR article said, check this out. Several weeks later, the board met on Zoom. They voted 17-3 to ask Boswell to step down. NPR obtained the audio. So this guy's church, they met a few weeks later and decided to get rid of this dude. It seemed because of that sermon where he kind of went all out against Donald Trump. I mean, everything he said in that sermon proved to be prophetic, at least accurate. I mean, Trump, Elon Musk, a bunch of spineless Republicans have let the president gut civil rights protections, especially for trans people and immigrants. They've dismantled as much of the government as possible by treating the government itself as the enemy without actually understanding what the government entails. They are creating chaos everywhere to the point where it's going to be really hard to undo the damage. That's kind of the point, right? So what this guy was saying, what Boswell was saying, very true. So he wasn't out of line. What he said was not surprising. He was telling his congregation the truth. And you heard the applause. They seemed to appreciate what he was saying too. So NPR said they obtained the audio of the board meeting where this guy was fired. And one of the things they pointed out is that the idea that they had, why did these people get rid of him? It's because they said Boswell has been given every chance to change his words and actions to appeal to a broader audience, but has not been successful in doing so. In fact, one of the deacons, one of the church leaders actually said this. Fellow deacon Robert Doolin was more direct. We have got to put more butts in the seats. Butts in the seats. And apparently they're mad at this pastor because what he's saying is pushing people away from the church instead of bringing them in. Like, I guess there's some logic to all this because the church is a business. And if they don't have customers, it's going to go out of business. That's how churches work, right? But to blame that on this pastor's preaching and not larger sociological trends seems unfair to me, especially when if you go to the church's website, you know what you find? Check this out. This is me right now going to this dude's church's website, Myers Park Baptist Church. This is their front page. Open to all. Inclusivity, community, spirituality, justice, and a rainbow colored symbol right there. Like, this is a church that paints itself as we're the welcoming church. If you're LGBTQ, you're welcome here. You expect the pastor to be like, yeah, I'm not going to be the gullible one who thinks Trump is one of us. He's the bad guy in all of this, and I'm going to tell you why he's the bad guy. That seems like exactly the sort of preaching you would want coming out of a church like this. Why would you be surprised by that? I don't get it. If the only way you think you can get people into a church like this is by watering down a fairly straightforward and honest message, maybe you should be asking yourself why you belong to this church at all. It's like the Democrats who are like, you know what we should do? We should work with Trump and hurt people because that seems to be what more voters want, without realizing that, no, you'd actually be way more popular if you didn't give in and all of you resisted and you spent every waking hour like taking the microphone and telling people why every Republican was destroying the entire country. So anyway, if you have a pastor who's living out the church's stated values from the pulpit, I don't know why the attendance problem is his fault, because what are you going to do? You're going to bring in a new pastor who's probably going to be preaching the same message because of what type of church this is. So how is that going to fix the problem? I don't know. Do these people want a larger MAGA-obsessed congregation, or do they want a smaller, loving one? I think that's the question they got to figure out. In fact, the NPR piece pointed out that some church members said this pastor was too radical for them, and that's where this piece got really funny. The problem, he said at the meeting, this is the same deacon I talked about earlier, is that too many other parishioners didn't something. Doolin said that many people who had left the church in recent years had complained about the 44-year-old pastor's heavy focus on social and racial justice. Why are you mad about that? Doolin paraphrased what he had heard over and over from those who had quit the parish. I'm tired of being indicted because I'm white. I'm tired of being banged over the head every week about immigrants and LGBTQ, and I just want to come to church and be encouraged. If you hear a pastor say Black Lives Matter, for example, or, hey, we got to help refugees, or it's our Christian duty to help the least of these and the people who are marginalized, and your first thought is, dude, I come to church to be encouraged, not to be told how to live my life. Why do you go to church? I don't understand what the purpose is. What do you want? If you want Joel Osteen, go watch it online or something. If you want someone who's actually telling you how to live according to the words of Jesus, however he interprets it, this guy seems like he's doing the job. I like this one too. Carol Pearsall, who's 73 and a longtime church member, said she heard the same thing from outgoing parishioners and knew what they meant. I was ready for less guilt trip and more love, said Pearsall, who added that she remains a fan of Boswell's and never considered leaving. Less guilt trip. I don't know, man. I'm in a lot of progressive circles, and I've never felt like I was being guilt tripped, because it's not always about me. It's drawing attention to people who are suffering and struggling, and maybe people who are privileged should try to help them. And if this person's like, oh, you make me feel bad, why don't you teach me about love? Well, okay, love the immigrant, love LGBTQ people. That's what this dude is saying. Apparently you don't like that either. So all these people are lying, apparently. So they're not looking for a new pastor. They're looking for an excuse to have more racism and bigotry in their sermons, apparently. In which case, I would just say, listen, it doesn't matter where you live. There are probably a ton of Southern Baptist churches in your area, tons of white evangelical churches that will embrace your faith-based bigotry. So go find one of them. It seems kind of ridiculous to me to go to or run an openly inclusive church and then whine about how it's too inclusive. Like, if your takeaway from criticisms of white Christian nationalism is that you're being attacked for being white, that's on you. That's your fault. Some of the commenters in the NPR piece actually literally complained that they put a Black Lives Matter sign outside the church. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with these people. I don't know what encouragement they're looking for, what love they are missing. If caring for the least of these is too damn annoying for these people, then go to a church where they don't give a shit about anyone but themselves, right? Now, I will say, there are legitimate reasons a church might get rid of a pastor like this. One argument against this guy is that one of the allegations is he did not take care of his congregation well. Now, he disputes that, but like, even those concerns seem to cover up that their actual concern is they just didn't like his preaching. Look at what someone else said at this church. Check this out. Bob Thomason, a former chairman of the Board of Deacons, said most or all of the congregation support social justice. But for some people, being able to focus on social justice would be a welcome luxury because they have alcoholic spouses, they have children that are addicted, they have cancer, they have those personal needs. Okay, I mean, one, you can go see a therapist too if you need that. But also, what? Like, he's focusing on social justice, and your response is, okay. But can you talk about me some more? I do not understand. These people just want like self-flagellation or something. And the idea that a guy is saying, let me tell you what Jesus said we ought to do. And they're like, sorry, it's not enough about me. I don't know what is wrong with everyone who goes to this church. Now, one of the good news, silver linings to all of this is that when this church fired Boswell, three deacons, three of those church leaders, they resigned in protest because of the obvious hypocrisy. And when the Charlotte Observer spoke to one of the guys who quit, this was really interesting. They spoke right after the Sunday meeting. They spoke right after that November sermon I played for you. Look at what one guy said. His name is Tim Emery. He said he doesn't think the stated reasons are the actual reasons for Boswell's termination. During the Sunday meeting, he said, one of the church leaders allegedly made a comment about Boswell being given chances to change his words and actions to appeal to a broader audience. That struck me as heavily coded language, Tim Emery said. There's a lot of old white people at that church who are performatively liberal, who, when push comes to shove, aren't comfortable talking about racial justice, aren't comfortable with his coarse and confronting whiteness, aren't comfortable with trans folks. I mean, yeah, that sounds about white, right? And the funniest thing about what that guy said about how a lot of people at this church are just performatively liberal, they asked the woman who's kind of running the church about that comment. And guess what she said about all this? Check this out. She said she also disagreed with Emery's characterization that Boswell's anti-racist positions played any role in the decision. I'll tell you, on a personal level, it's incredibly insulting that Tim said that. I have a brown son. Unbelievable. A woman says, I can't possibly be racist. How dare you accuse me of not supporting anti-racist sermons? I have a brown son, which is totally the way non-racist people talk about their kids. I don't know. Listen, I literally have a brown son. I've never once in public said, I have a brown son. What the hell? Who talks that way? It's so weird. She's going with the I'm related to a person of color, therefore I can't be racist argument, which is a very weird one. Like, JD Vance is absolutely racist. I don't care who he's married to. Ginny Thomas, she's married to Clarence Thomas. She's totally racist. Clarence Thomas is totally a white supremacist. I don't care what color he is. Those two things are not in opposition to each other. So I don't know. I agree about that performative liberalism thing. Plenty of liberals like saying they're liberal, but don't actually follow through on that. It's like, what do we talk about? Richard Dawkins, Jerry Coyne, all those guys who are like, I'm an old school liberal, but also screw trans people. I'm going to speak out against them every single time. So yeah, those people exist all over the place. I also appreciated what one church member told NPR about all this. Check this out. When asked about the fact that some white congregants said they felt beaten down by Boswell's continued emphasis on social and racial justice, this guy, Griffin, responded that as a black man, he felt beaten down every day. And this guy's leaving Myers Park, the church. Yeah, white people are not suffering as much as everyone else on that front. So, anyway, mission accomplished, I guess, for the church's leaders. They don't want to feel guilty, and now they won't have to. They can focus on a broader message that ignores political realities. They can preach a message that appeals to the white elderly members of the church instead of sermons that might appeal to younger, more open minded people in the community whose families could eventually become more permanent members of the church. Like, if your problem is attendance, why are you trying to appease the old people who are not going to be there for very long and not try to attract a new audience? I don't get it. But what do I know about running a church? I don't know. These people don't want to be challenged. They don't want their faith to interfere with whatever it is they want to do. It's the same reason. I know I mentioned her in the last segment, but like conservatives who always wear their religion on their sleeves, like Mike Johnson, they were so damn offended when Bishop Marianne Buddy asked Donald Trump to follow Jesus and have mercy on the marginalized. They don't care about Jesus. They just want to use their religious label to get more political power so that they can hurt everyone they deem as inferior to them. So the funny thing is, the only person who comes out of this story looking good is Ben Boswell, the pastor who no longer is working at that church. All right, I'm going to stop there for now. What other questions we have? Wow, this Christian sounds like a Christian. I know sometimes those sermons are not bad. Like if you took away the religious rhetoric, it would actually be fun to listen to. Religions morph into what people want. What it's supposed to be is irrelevant. It's why we have 9 gazillion forms of Christianity, right? Yep. They want to never be challenged. I know. Again, why do you go to church if you don't want to be challenged? I thought that's the whole point of you go there to learn more so you can be a better person in theory. And these people are like, "Oh, you're making me think too hard. Stop it." I talked with a pastor friend who asked herself, "Do I just serve the people who are in front of me or do I try to drag them toward a broader vision?" She ended up just wanting the butts in seats. I mean, there were a lot of stories during Trump's first term about evangelical pastors who were like, I I'm a my congregation is full of MAGA people, but I also know what Jesus taught, and those two things are in conflict, and there is pressure on me to satisfy the people who come to church and not talk about Jesus, or at least the way they thought they should be talking about Jesus. And some of them ended up leaving their jobs, the courageous ones anyway, and a whole bunch of sellouts chose not to. The older members have deep pockets, thus more power. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. Absolutely.